Hello and welcome to Newsweek South Asia, your one-stop destination for in-depth analysis of security challenges, regional conflicts, and the evolving threat of terrorism. Let's take a look at the headlines first. India remembers 26/11 victims as the world stands in solidarity. Peshawar attack highlights Pakistan's deepening security collapse. And Pak bombs Afghan territory, killing women and children as tensions escalate. 17 years after the 26/11 Mumbai terror attacks, India stands united in remembrance and resolve. The nation paid homage to the 166 innocent lives lost and honored the extraordinary courage of survivors and security forces who risked everything to protect the city. Memorial events were held across Mumbai and beyond, even as the international community reiterated its support for India's ongoing fight against terrorism. Here is our report.
November 26, 2008, a date forever seared into India's collective memory. 17 years ago, 10 heavily armed terrorists from the Pakistan-based Lashkar-e-Taiba launched one of the deadliest attacks in the country's history. Over 4 horrifying days, they stormed Mumbai's busiest landmarks, the Taj Mahal Palace Hotel, the Oberoi Trident, CST railway station, and several crowded streets, killing 166 people and injuring over 300. The attackers arrived by sea, carrying assault rifles, grenades and explosives, moving with chilling precision. As the nation watched in disbelief, acts of extraordinary courage emerged from the chaos, alongside stories of loss that still haunt families today. Across India, people paused to pay tribute to the victims, the people who lost their lives, and the survivors who continue to live with the emotional and physical scars of that night.
जब मैंने कसाब को फायरिंग करते हुए स्टेशन पे देखा था देन 10 जून को जाके कोर्ट में मैंने कसाब को आइडेंटिफाई की थी। मेरे पप्पा ने दोनों को देखा था, कसाब और अब्बू इस्माइल को, और मैंने कसाब को। फिर जब मेरे सामने कोर्ट रूम में 3 शख्स रखे गए थे, उसमें से मुझे कसाब को आइडेंटिफाई करना था। जो जज साहब के साइड में फर्स्ट में बैठा था वो था आतंकवादी कसाब। मुझे काफी कंफ्यूज करने की कोशिश भी किए गए, नहीं आप ये बता रहे हो, नहीं आप वो बता रहे हो। मैंने बोला नहीं, यही आतंकवादी जिसकी गोली मुझे लगी थी। मेरे सामने कई लोगों को इसने मार दिया था और उसके चेहरे पे कोई डर नहीं था। ऐसा लग रहा था हम लोगों को मार के उसे खुशी मिल रही है। वो उस चीज को वो इंजॉय कर रहा था तभी फायरिंग करते हुए। और वो शख्स का जो शक्ल है वो आज भी मेरे जहन में वैसी ही बसी हुई है, अभी तक वो निकल नहीं पाया है।
Tributes poured in from across the country and around the world. The National Security Guard held its annual Never Ever Memorial at the Gateway of India, honoring the martyrs and reaffirming the nation's resolve that such an attack must never recur.
चाहे कुछ भी गलत करने की दुश्मन कोशिश करे, हम अपने प्रण में, हम आगे बढ़ने के लक्ष्य में एथिकल तौर पे हम आगे बढ़ते रहेंगे। आज आपने देखा होगा विभिन्न वर्ग के लोग, विभिन्न डिपार्टमेंट्स के लोग, विभिन्न आयु के वर्ग के लोग यहाँ पे आए थे, जिसमें कि एनसीसी से लोग आए थे, जिसमें लोग आर्मी से आए थे, नेवी, एयरफोर्स, कोस्ट गार्ड, महाराष्ट्र पुलिस, जो यहाँ का ब्यूरोक्रेसी तंत्र है वहाँ के लोग, कुछ लीडर्स, कुछ सेलिब्रिटीज, सब ने इस अवसर पर आके अपनी भावपूर्ण श्रद्धांजलि हमारे शहीदों को अर्पित की है। और आने वाले वक्त में हम उनकी जो बलिदान है उसको याद रखेंगे। और जब हम ट्रेन करते हैं, हम हमेशा ध्यान में ये चीज को ध्यान में रखते हैं कि हमारे पूर्वजों ने इस देश के लिए अपना लहू बहाया है और हम उनकी शान में कोई आंच ना आने दें।
The United States Embassy in India expressed solidarity with the survivors and vowed continued support to ensure that all those responsible for the attacks are brought to justice. Israel too extended its support, emphasizing its shared experience in fighting terrorism and its deep defense cooperation with India.
Look, I must say that both countries, Israel and India, are facing the same challenges when it coming to counterterrorism. So we perfectly understand India's perspective when it comes to fighting terrorism, and we also respect the fact that India is understanding Israel's right to defend itself against terrorist activities. Look, first of all, we have a lot of defense cooperation between the two states, India and Israel. Luckily, or in a way, Israel has combat-proven capabilities, and we're glad to share it with our Indian friends.
17 years later, the wounds of 26/11 remain fresh, not only because of the brutality of the attack, but because justice still feels incomplete. While India honors its martyrs with pride and dignity, key masterminds of the operation continue to roam freely in Pakistan. Despite global pressure and repeated commitments, Islamabad has yet to dismantle the Lashkar-e-Taiba network or bring its leaders to genuine trial. As the nations like the US and Israel pledge unwavering support, the message from India is clear. Remembrance must be matched with responsibility. Terror groups cannot flourish under the shelter of a state without consequences. Mumbai has rebuilt itself with resilience, but the quest for justice continues. Until every mastermind of 26/11 is held accountable, the memory of that night will stand as a reminder not only of India's strength, but of Pakistan's continued failure to act against the terror machinery operating on its soil.
Moving on, Pakistan's security crisis has once again come into sharp focus after a deadly attack in Peshawar. 2 suicide bombers and a gunman stormed the Federal Constabulary headquarters, killing and injuring several paramilitary personnel. CCTV footage captured the chaos, highlighting the state's persistent vulnerabilities. Residents in the area say fear has gripped daily life as markets and businesses remain shuttered. Analysts warn that such attacks are the result of long-standing strategic miscalculations that continue to plague the country's security apparatus. Take a look.
For years, Pakistan has experimented with security framework, and today the consequences of those long-standing shortcomings are once again on display. Repeated intelligence lapses, inconsistent counter-terror policies and shifting state strategies have left the country unable to contain the very terror networks that once operated with relative freedom. The latest attack in Peshawar, where 2 suicide bombers and a gunman stormed the Federal Constabulary headquarters, killing and injuring several paramilitary personnel, underscores how deeply the security crisis has taken root. As CCTV captured the chaos of the assault, it also laid bare an uncomfortable reality. Pakistan's security apparatus remains fundamentally unprepared, its institutions weakened by years of policy failures that have left the state unable to confront the very threats it helped create.
हमारे जितने भी साथी थे जिनको पता है कि मेरा इधर शॉप है, तो हर कोई मुझे इत्तला कर रहा था कि यार आप किधर हो, तो मैं तो कह रहा था कि मैं तो घर में हूँ। फिर जब इधर आ गए तो इधर तो सारा रास्ते बंद थी, सील थे। फिर जब सिक्योरिटी फोर्सेस ने ये रोड खोल लिया तो फिर हम अपने मार्केट को आ गए। तो बहुत काबिल मजम्मत है, ये बहुत ज़्यादती है, ये नहीं होना चाहिए और इसका हम जितनी भी अल्फाज में शदीद मजम्मत करें वो कम है। तो इस वजह से ये अफरा तफरी भी है, लोगों में खौफ व हिरास भी है।
According to security officials, the attackers opened fire as they forced their way into the Federal Constabulary headquarters, triggering a fierce exchange before both suicide bombers detonated themselves inside the facility. The assault not only exposed glaring security gaps, but also plunged nearby markets into fear and paralysis as residents scrambled for safety amid the uncertainty.
خامخا یاره خو شته دی ځکه چې دا اوس دا وګوره دا ټول مارکیټونه هم بند شو، خلکو کروڑو روپو نقصان وشو پوه شوې، اخوا هم دوکانونه بند دي او مالي جاني دواړو نقصان وشو پوه شوې او باقي دی الله خیر وکړي.
This attack in Peshawar is not an anomaly. It is the direct outcome of years of strategic miscalculations. Analysts have long warned that Pakistan's decision to tolerate, enable and selectively negotiate with militant groups for geopolitical leverage would eventually backfire. Today, the country is paying the price for those choices. Terrorists, once viewed as assets, have splintered, multiplied and turned their guns inward. The state's attempts to reverse course have been inconsistent and many argue too late. The Peshawar bombing is not just a security breach, it is a reflection of a national security doctrine that has failed spectacularly. As attacks persist, Pakistan finds itself battling forces it once believed it could control, leaving its citizens to absorb the consequences.
A fresh wave of grief swept through the eastern Afghan province of Kunar after an overnight bombardment, which the Taliban administration says was carried out by Pakistani forces, reduced several civilian homes to rubble and killed at least 9 children and 1 woman. The strike comes only hours after a suicide attack in Pakistan's city of Peshawar, an incident Islamabad has linked to militants allegedly operating from Afghan soil.
The suicide attack in Peshawar appears to have provided Pakistan with a pretext to launch military strikes across the border. According to the Taliban administration, overnight airstrikes killed at least 10 civilians, including 9 children and 1 woman in Kunar province. Residents were left to sift through the debris of homes reduced to rubble in what locals describe as a brutal and unprovoked attack. Kunar was one of 3 eastern Afghan provinces bordering Pakistan reportedly hit in the operation. The Taliban say the strikes follow a series of incidents in Pakistan that Islamabad attributes to militants allegedly based in Afghanistan.
او مطلب دا دی چې دې کې دلته موږ سره نور داسې ناشنا خلک نشته دا ټول د څاګي اوسېدونکي او دا یو شخصي کور و او په دې باندې برید وشو پاکستان بېرحمانه بریدونه کوي او ملکي کورونه ولي او تلفات خلکو ته اړ د آبادي تاسو وینئ ټوله خوځېدلې 2 منزله کور و او ماشومان هغه مطلب دا دی زخمیان او 2 منزله آبادي د منځه لاړه دلته موږ سره غیر خلک نشته نه پوسته شته دی او نه مطلب داسې ناشنا خلک موږ شته.
In Kunar, entire homes have been reduced to rubble, leaving families shattered and homeless. Survivors describe horrifying scenes: walls torn apart, furniture crushed, and personal belongings buried under debris. Even sacred Qurans and children's school books lie in ruins, a stark reminder of the innocent lives affected.
شوی دغه کور تاسو وینئ چې په دغه کور کې قرآن مجید شهید شوی او سپارې وې ماشومانو مکتب کتابونه پکې تخریب شوي دا کور په مکمل طور 3 منزله کور د ټول د منځه تللی دی د بنیاده پورې ټول د منځه تللی دی نو موږ د خپل حکومت نه غوښتنه کوو چې داسې پیښو مخنیوی دې وکړي.
The latest strike depends long-standing tensions along the Durand Line, the disputed colonial-era frontier separating Pakistan and Afghanistan. Over the past several years, Pakistan has repeatedly accused Afghan authorities of providing safe havens to militant groups that carry out attacks inside Pakistan. Afghan officials, on the other hand, charge that Pakistan uses these allegations as a pretext to justify cross-border attacks that overwhelmingly harm civilians. These accusations are part of a broader regional pattern. For over 2 decades, Islamabad has insisted that anti-Pakistan militants slip across the mountainous border into Pakistan after regrouping in Afghan territory. Kabul, under both previous governments and the current Taliban administration, maintains that Pakistan exaggerates or misinterprets the threat to legitimize military operations inside Afghanistan. In October, tensions nearly erupted into a full-scale confrontation when the Pakistan Air Force struck the civilian population in Afghanistan's Paktika province. The attack triggered a fierce exchange of fire across the border, leaving about 200 Afghans and 15 Pakistanis dead, according to local officials from both sides. Despite a temporary ceasefire that followed, negotiations remain stalled. Each country accuses the other of failing to control militant groups operating within their territory. Regional analysts warn that the ceasefire is fragile and one major incident away from total collapse.
On November 10, 2025, a car exploded in a suicide bomb attack near the Red Fort metro station in Delhi, killing several people. Later, a video emerged of the alleged suicide bomber, Umar-un-Nabi, in which he can be seen speaking to the camera, appearing to justify the act of suicide bombing. In this week's episode of Newsweek South Asia, we speak with a Kashmiri political activist and the director of the European Foundation for South Asian Studies to understand the incident, the evolving threats of suicide bombings, and the broader framework of radicalization and terrorism in Kashmir. Sir, welcome to our show. How do you view the fact that a well-educated Kashmiri youth carried out a suicide bombing in Delhi?
I think for us as Kashmiris, and especially as a society, but also as Kashmiri Muslims, I think it's a very worrying trend. I think we as a society, as Kashmiris, should perhaps introspect how we have come to this position that educated youth, people who are doctors, not stone pelters who don't have a job, people who are well settled, are justifying suicide bombing, justifying the killing of innocent people. And I think the time of all the time saying that, you know, this is not part of Islam, to which I agree, it is not part of Islam. But I think there is a more concerted effort needed from us, from Kashmiris, Kashmiri Muslims especially, but also Muslims elsewhere in India, to come out openly against these people.
Why do you think this suicide attack happened? What trends worry you the most, especially regarding the role of religious extremism?
I think it's now it has become much more difficult to conduct attacks, terrorist attacks, and then also still run away alive. So suicide bombings is, of course, not a new phenomena. The worrying trend here, of course, is that the suicide bombers are trying to justify it with foundations of their interpretations of religion, and that's a problem. If you watch the video of Umar Nabi, he's saying this is not suicide, this is martyrdom, because suicide, of course, has a very different connotation in religion. So that is, I think, the most important and the most difficult part and the most worrying part, that these people don't consider it as suicide, they consider it a path to martyrdom. And I think now, because of the more concerted efforts in the world, but also in India, of trying to stop terrorist attacks, trying to attack the infrastructure of terrorism, these suicide bombings are a worrying trend, and I think they will continue more and more, because it has become difficult to conduct attacks and then just disappear and still be alive. So this is indeed worrying.
How do you assess Pakistan's attempts to portray terrorism in Kashmir as a homegrown phenomenon rather than something it sponsors?
The worrying trend here is not the white collar trend. The worrying trend here is that more and more Pakistan has tried to make it appear as if this is a Kashmiri owned thing. In the past, India has been very successful at diplomatic levels in exposing cross-border terrorism by Pakistan, whether that's from Punjab, whether that's the Jaish, Lashkar, or even the Pashtun belt. More recently, what you have seen is that Pakistan has tried to put the onus back and on Kashmiris in order to tell the world that this is an indigenous movement by Kashmiris while they are being trained in Pakistan and they are being armed by Pakistan. As you see, during the last so-called Solidarity Day of February 5th in Pakistan, the various jalsas were not conducted in Lahore or in Pindi. They were conducted in Rawalakot, in Punch, in areas which are under occupation of Pakistan and which are Kashmiri areas. The same happening here. Now you have doctors, now you have Kashmiris who are getting involved or trying to get involved. So that gives Pakistan the plausible deniability of saying, look, this is done by the Kashmiris. And as you may remember, just recently, a new group also came into emergence, which is the Tehreek-e-Taliban Kashmir. Again, this is an effort to try to put the onus on Kashmir and Kashmiris so that Pakistan has plausible deniability in the world and can say this is happening by Kashmiris, they are doing this themselves, and Pakistan is not involved, while you and I and everyone else knows the truth, of course.
How do you see the role of radicalization infrastructure such as extremist networks and certain madrasas in influencing and brainwashing vulnerable youth in Kashmir?
I will come back to one issue that, which has been raised in the media earlier as well. I've written about it years ago, and that is the infrastructure of religious radical schooling, education. And then you come back to madrasas in Pakistan and the madrasa thought in Kashmir and elsewhere in India, how madrasas export their ideology, non-secular, radical interpretation of Islam to Kashmir. And then you have in very far-flung areas, you have people who don't have the opportunity to go to schools, and they are indoctrinated by this thought. Pakistan has more than 80,000 madrasas, and I think the government here should maybe do a check on how many madrasas are unregistered, how many madrasas go unchecked, what is taught at these madrasas, who are the teachers.
What are the major challenges India now faces in dealing with this evolving security and radicalization landscape?
India is a very big country. You can't. It's 1.5 billion people. Unless and until people themselves will not shun the path of violence, such incidents will, of course, continue to happen. There needs to be a counter-terrorism preparedness, and I think India has definitely increased that. At the same time, in such a big country with 1.5 billion people, incidents are bound to happen if people subscribe to radical ideologies and they have access to weapons and ammunition, which in this neighborhood there are ample countries which are willing to provide that to people here in India. So because at the end of the day, a big country or a very sophisticated country like America, 9/11 still happened. There are still terrorist attacks happening in Europe. So no country is immune to terrorist attacks. It is the people who make the country immune to terrorist attacks.
Thank you, sir, for sharing your insights with us.
Thank you.
And with that, we come to the end of this edition of Newsweek South Asia. We will be back next week with more news, views and analysis from the subcontinent. Meanwhile, do keep writing to us at nwsa@anin.com. This is Akansha Parimu signing off on behalf of the entire team of Newsweek South Asia. Goodbye and take care.